death, and Elvis. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Get that coffee. Today is my first short story collection by Denis Johnson, The Largesse of the Sea Maiden. I think this cover is just a little too bright and harmless. Yeah? It just looks like pleasant jellyfish in the water. This is a collection of 5 darkly humorous short stories dealing with loneliness, aging, awkward life moments, love, drugs, writing, madness, death, and Elvis Presley. All the things that make life worth living. The theme of mortality is everywhere in the novel, and it's hard not to think about the fact that this was published posthumously after Johnson passed away in 2017. He passed away just a few weeks after completing this collection, apparently. This was published in 2018. The end of the short story in here, Triumph Over the Grave, is a man writing a letter saying, "It's plain to you that at the time I write this, I'm not dead, but maybe by the time you read it." Denis Johnson was an American poet and writer and has been called a writer's writer. Jonathan Franzen has said he's the one writer whom every writer he knows can quote multiple lines from verbatim. Death is everywhere in this book for Johnson, as Franzen points out in this talk that I've linked to in the description box below. The feeling he suggests the book communicates is one of the constant presence of death. Johnson published his first book of poems at 19, and then got strung out in the 70s on alcohol and heroin. So he's had experience with the material and the constant threat of death. You know, it seems like he's pushed the limits, like he's almost gone too far, maybe more than once, like the characters in his stories. Johnson himself said, "I went from prodigy to prodigal in a hurry." This collection is, I'm assuming, the last that Johnson wrote, and the first book of his that I've read. It may have been better to start with one of his famous titles, Jesus' Son or Train Dreams, but better here than nowhere. And it came highly recommended from some good friends. It's not magical realism, but it's realism that feels magical. That may be the best way I can describe Johnson's work. It's gritty and dark and kind of totally morbid and at some points, I guess, genuinely fucked up, but there's a lot of heart in Johnson. It's never pessimistic or nihilistic. There's something about Johnson's work that is reassuring in the threat of pain and misery and tragedy and death. There's an odd sense of humor like, yeah, shit sucks, but what can you do? It's honest writing. It's balanced. These stories are believably absurd. You know what I mean? They're in the realm of the possible, kind of, most of them, usually. Yet somehow just the reading of them allows you to reflect on just how strange life can be. And just when things kind of slip into a routine and you kind of get into a groove in his writing, I'm surprised by some sort of rupture, like some line is just dropped. A moment of total lucidity and then falling back into the recognizable rhythm of life, the flow of things. But you gotta read it for yourself. It's super easy to read, it's incredibly engaging, very, very funny, very clever. It feels very unpretentious, it feels very solid. It's filled with oddball American characters, usually down and out. Certainly in the vein of Hard Rain Falling by Don Carpenter or Fat City by Leonard Gardner. Prison stories and Elvis conspiracy theories. One guy has leg surgery in front of an audience of students while on acid. Another visits a dying writer in Austin, Texas, which is where I'm at now, and I love it very much. Interestingly, his full name is Denis Hale Johnson. Said fictitious dying author was named Darcy Hale Miller, but the character visiting the dying author was a professor, I believe, at the University of Texas at Austin, just like Johnson at one point. Johnson occasionally taught there. So what I'm wondering is, was Denis Johnson incorporating aspects of himself into these two characters, imagining visiting his dying self in a way? It's very interesting, and that would be the first time I've heard of that. Michel Houellebecq wrote himself as a character into one of his novels and then I think murdered himself, like killed him. His character was killed in the book, which it's dark, but that's really funny. But that's what the book seems like to me, a meditation on mortality by a man who can sense his looming death. The story of this guy named Cass recovering in rehab ends with him signing off this letter, because it's just all these letters that he's written. That's the whole short story. And he signs off with, more than once I've woke up with some medical professional saying, you should be dead. That's what it's going to say on my gravestone. I should be dead. Your brother in Christ, Cass. He's a funny guy, Johnson. Johnson's a funny guy. I think he has the right attitude. I think he had the right attitude, rather. That just made me think of another line from the book where this guy's leaving a restroom and he tells... That's so what? Oh, man. Actually, it's the part when you read it. It's so awkward. It's totally believable. Like something like any of us would do, especially the shock of just, I'm crying. It's so funny. I think it's just like, an awkward thing that any one of us would do, but it's after this guy gets the news of the death of his friend, and which is, of course, is horrible. But he's talking to the guy's son in the restroom, and the last line he says to him before they part ways is just it's just perfectly funny, in just one of those awkward human instances. You just got to read it. I'm not even going to tell you. It's minimalist economical writing, quintessentially American, whatever the fuck that means. How that is, well, I'm not sure. Could be the Carver influence in the comparison to Hemingway, two giants of American literature. It has that style, that tone. Johnson took classes from Raymond Carver in the 70s. My favorite one of them all is the last one, Doppelganger Poltergeist. It's about a university professor who discovers a brilliant poet, but he's kind of an oddball, an Elvis conspiracy theorist. You see, despite the fact that he's an incredible poet, he has this obsession. He tried to dig up Elvis's grave. The obsession seems to have stemmed from the death of his older brother, who fell from a tree years before. This older brother was so cool that the poet wanted his epitaph to say, the gods worshipped him. He was like this super slick guy, just totally cool. And his brother was a fan of Elvis. So this guy, he's a gifted poet, but that's not the most important thing in his life. The most important thing is proving his Elvis theory. So he's developed this entire story for the fate of Elvis. Something like his evil manager had him killed off and then replaced with his twin brother after he joined the army. The same legendary stillborn twin, Jesse Presley. The twin brother of Elvis who was supposedly dead, but not actually dead. His theory was that he, in fact, was the mediocre Elvis we know died on the toilet. And the only person he shares this obsession with is this professor. Needless to say, the poet goes to great lengths to prove his theory, including digging up the unmarked grave of Elvis's twin brother. In that respect, it reminds me of the grim Southern Gothic comedy of Cormac McCarthy's Suttree. If you haven't had a chance to read that and this sounds good, then, read this and then read that, definitely. There's a scene from Jarmusch's Coffee and Cigarettes with Steve Buscemi as an annoying Southern waiter who just won't stop going on about this Elvis conspiracy theory, which is similar. So I've linked to that in the description box below. It's tragic, dark, and very funny. There's a couple of moments where it just has you shaking your head, such as the following. Oh, let's see, 199. Yes, Mark plundered an infant's grave. If he'd told me in advance, if he'd asked me to come along to abet him, serve as his accomplice, would I have agreed? Instantly. Gratefully. I discount his theory, but I value the obsession. And I commend his nerve. Old Southern graveyards harbor an unwholesome power comparable to that of nuclear disaster sites. My mother's people came, as I think I've indicated, from the Carolinas. Everybody down there knows that the graves of night tremble at her foot. If anyone were crazy or curious enough to walk on them under a waning crescent moon, and this is what Marcus Ahern was doing that night in the Priceville Cemetery outside Tupelo with a shrouded flashlight, manhandling the graves, looking for a metal marker numbered 867, buried beneath the winter grass. That's just fucking nuts. Those of you who know me and watch the show know I enjoy dark humor. And I have to say, this one had me laughing out loud a couple times, I think. And that's not a frequent occurrence. So any book that can do that, I'm always grateful when I can get an author who can deliver some truly serious pathos while cracking me up. That's a special writer, you know what I mean? Not many people can do that. Because it's not cringy. He's not trying hard. It's so effortless almost, it seems. It's enviable. It's like really fucking good. And some of it's very simple, like in the short story, The Starlight on Idaho, filled with letters written by this guy, Mark Cassandra, who's hit rock bottom and is starting to go insane from his medication while in rehab, which he describes as a salvage yard for people who've totaled their souls. He starts writing letters to Satan and the Pope, and separate letters, you know? So the one to the Pope is like, "Dear Pope John Paul, do you have two first names, or is Paul your last name, like your Mr. Paul?" And one of the letters to Satan ends like this: "My grandma puts it that, Cass, if you keep drinking, your babies will come out cross-eyed and you'll end up buried in a strange town with your name spelled wrong on your grave." Grandma was probably right. So I wasn't head over heels for the book, but even sitting here talking about it makes me appreciate it more. It's starting to grow. My suspicion is that there's really something here, and it just hasn't quite grabbed me yet. It hasn't like infected me. I haven't gotten I think I know that there's something really, really valuable in the writing of Denis Johnson. There's really something there with a lot of soul. I feel like I have a good sense to know when the author is very good, and I'm just not quite immersed yet. I think I gotta read some of his more famous work and then really, really get in there, like Jesus' Son, Train Dreams, so on. It's as if I got a few other authors just running around in my head right now, and I need to get them out, exorcise them before I can sit down and really appreciate Johnson, or something like that. You know, when you get several different voices running around in your head. Y'all know when you get voices in your head just yelling at you all the time, day and night? But The Largesse of the Sea Maiden, better than food, for sure. So who should read it? If you're a fan of Flannery O'Connor, Don Carpenter, Harry Crews, John Fonte, Nick Cave, Leonard Gardner, Cormac McCarthy, and Charles Bukowski, any of those, pick it up. I think you'll really enjoy it. Funny thing, a friend of mine's brother was working at the studio where the last Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds album was recorded. I'm assuming this would be Ghosteen, and he had the chance to ask Nick Cave who his favorite author was. And I could be wrong, but I think he said Denis Johnson. For those of you who are new, Nick Cave, particularly early Bad Seeds birthday party era Nick Cave, is my Elvis, if I had one. Not to the degree of the obsessive character in the story by any means, but I trust the guy's taste. He's also a good author. I've got And the Ass Saw the Angel. I reviewed that one a while back. That's a pretty good one. Yeah, if you enjoyed And the Ass Saw the Angel, I would definitely check out Denis Johnson. And if you like Denis Johnson, I would definitely check out Nick Cave's And the Ass Saw the Angel. And now, it is time for the coffee lottery. Isn't this great? My wife got this in Memphis. For those of you who are new, the coffee lottery is where I take the names of the patrons who have donated $5 or more on Patreon. I place all their names into this mason jar, and for each review I pull out a name, and whoever's name I pull out, they get a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. And if you'd like to get in on that, you could head over to the description box below and click on the link, or go to patreon.com/books-are-better-than-food and donate $5 or more per video, and you shall get entered in. And $1 or more will get you access to the patron-only reviews, plus the Better Than Friday newsletter that I send out every week. And it's just a list of things that I'm interested in, and books in the pipeline, articles, music, all kinds of stuff. Thanks so much to everybody who supported the show, and best of luck. All right, here we go. Oh, Jeffrey, thanks a bunch, Jeffrey. Really appreciate it, man. You're going to receive The Largesse of the Sea Maiden by Denis Johnson, plus some delicious coffee. Happy holidays. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and please follow me on Instagram. You can DM me and let me know which books you think are better than food. I really appreciate it. And I love recommendations. The list is long, but you know, I love recommendations. Please always remember to bring a book. Maybe you still need to purchase some holiday gifts, and maybe you know somebody who would enjoy this book. If so, the channel gets a kickback if you use the link below, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching. Great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Happy holidays, and I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.